Picture this. It's the Super Bowl, or the World Cup final, or whatever the biggest game of the year is in your country. The entire office is buzzing. Your group chat is on fire. Someone at the party is literally pacing the room, hands on their head, like the outcome of this game is personally connected to their survival. And you're sitting there, snack in hand, thinking, I mean, it's fine. It's just a game, right? And then comes that look. You know the one. The look that says, what is wrong with you? Here's the thing. Nothing is wrong with you, but something incredibly interesting is going on inside your brain. And today we're going to unpack exactly what that is. Because the psychology of people who don't obsess over sports isn't about being cold or disconnected or somehow culturally defective. It's actually a window into how human identity, tribal bonding, and dopamine systems work, and why some people's brains are just wired to plug into those systems through completely different channels. So let's talk about it. First, let's understand why sports fandom is so powerful for the people who do love it, because that's the baseline we're working against. Sports, at their psychological core, are a tribal ritual, and I mean that in the most literal, anthropological sense. Humans evolved in small groups where belonging to your tribe wasn't just comforting, it was survival. Your identity, your safety, your meaning were all wrapped up in your group. Fast forward several thousand years, and your brain hasn't forgotten that wiring. It still craves a tribe, a we, a collective identity to root for and belong to. Sports, brilliantly, give people a ready-made tribe. You didn't have to earn it or work for it. You were born in Boston, so now you bleed Red Sox. Simple, clean, tribal. Researchers call this burging, basking in reflected glory. When your team wins, your own self-esteem actually rises. Brain scans confirm it. Testosterone spikes. Dopamine floods in. You feel like you won, even though you were sitting on a couch eating nachos. Your brain has borrowed the team's victory and made it personal. That's not irrational. That's deeply, profoundly human. So now the question becomes, what happens in the brain of someone who doesn't get that hit from sports? Here's where it gets fascinating. It's not that non-sports people lack the tribal wiring. They have it too. Every single one of us has it. The difference is in what activates it. Think about the person who can't sleep after a cliffhanger episode of a TV series, or the one who's devastated when a beloved book series ends badly, or the one who feels an almost irrational pride when their favorite musician drops an incredible album. That is the same circuitry, the same my team feeling, just aimed at a different target. Psychologists have a term for this broader phenomenon: parasocial bonding and identity-based enthusiasm. And research consistently shows that the need to belong, to invest emotionally in something larger than yourself, is universal. What varies is the content that satisfies that need. For some people, sports happen to be the perfect trigger. For others, it's bands, or fandoms, or intellectual communities, or creative movements. So if you've ever felt weirdly defensive about a TV show or a band, like you took it personally when someone criticized them, congratulations. You have sports fan energy. It's just been redirected. Now, there's another layer here that I think is really worth sitting with, and it has to do with how we find meaning. Sports, for their biggest fans, often function as what psychologist Viktor Frankl might have called a meaning structure, not just entertainment, something to organize time around, to create ritual, to give you a reason to gather. Monday Night Football isn't just football. It's the reason to call your dad, the reason to go to a bar with friends, the reason your neighborhood feels like a neighborhood. Strip away the sport, and what you're often left with is a container for connection. People who don't feel that pull from sports aren't lacking the need for those things. They're just finding their containers elsewhere. Maybe it's through cooking, or travel, or activism, or an intensely followed podcast community, or long hikes with the same group of friends every weekend. The ritual is different. The meaning-making is the same. I think this is genuinely important to understand. There's also a personality dimension here that researchers have spent a good deal of time exploring. People high in a trait called openness to experience, one of the big 5 personality traits, tend to be drawn toward novelty, abstraction, imagination, and unconventional interests. They're the people who are more likely to geek out over obscure films, or get deeply into niche hobbies, or feel more satisfied by creative or intellectual pursuits than by the competitive drama of a game. Interestingly, high openness is also linked to lower need for closure, meaning people high in this trait are more comfortable with ambiguity, with things that don't have a clear winner and loser. A football game ends. Score, 24-17, closure achieved. But a philosophical question, or an artistic journey, or a lifelong creative practice, no final whistle, no scoreboard. And for some people, that's actually more satisfying, not less. None of this is a value judgment. Low or high openness to experience is neither good nor bad. It's just a different way of being in the world. And understanding that helps explain, without judgment, why the Super Bowl is the high point of one person's year and barely a blip on another's radar. There's one more thing I want to bring in here, and it's the social cost of not caring about sports. Because let's be real, it exists. If you're someone who doesn't follow sports in a culture that's heavily sports-centric, you've probably felt it. The awkward moment when you have nothing to contribute to the conversation. The polite nod when someone's talking about a game you didn't watch. There can be a subtle, or sometimes not so subtle, sense of being on the outside. And here's what I think is psychologically important to understand about that experience. It doesn't mean you're bad at belonging. It means you're belonging somewhere else. Social identity research by Henry Tajfel and John Turner showed that people will naturally categorize themselves and others into groups, and that our sense of self is deeply tied to those categories. The mistake is assuming there's only one valid category, that sports fan is the default setting for a connected human being. It isn't. It's one very popular setting among many. The people who navigate this most gracefully, who don't feel diminished by not caring about sports, and who don't feel superior about it either, tend to have a really stable sense of where their own belonging lives. They know their tribe. They've found their container. They're not threatened by someone else's container looking different. So if you're watching this and you're one of those people, someone who spent their whole life slightly baffled by the sports obsession around them, I want to leave you with this thought. Your brain isn't broken. Your tribal wiring isn't missing. You are not less passionate, less communal, or less emotionally alive than the person weeping into their team jersey. You are just someone whose dopamine says yes to something different. And the fact that you've probably spent time wondering why you feel the way you do, that curiosity, that self-reflection, is itself a kind of psychological sophistication worth celebrating. And if you're someone who loves sports and you're trying to understand the person in your life who doesn't, maybe this helps. They're not withholding connection from you. They just built their meaning in a different room of the same house. Understanding that might be the most powerful thing you take away from this. We're all looking for the same things: belonging, ritual, meaning, and a reason to feel alive. The sport we choose, whether it's on a field, on a stage, in a book, or in the kitchen, is just the vehicle. If this resonated with you, drop a comment below and tell me, where does your passion live? What's your version of sports? I'd genuinely love to know. And if you find this kind of psychology as fascinating as I do, there's a lot more where this came from. So stick around.